Hello, my name is Edward Collins, and I just finished up The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan, and we dropped so many different topics and different nuggets of wisdom, some of which dealt with the IRS, some of which dealt with the government, some of which dealt with the concept of financial freedom. And if you're interested in any of those topics, you're definitely going to want to check it out.
Welcome to The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. A podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs unlocked success and how their stories can help you do the same. Introducing TEDx speaker, mastermind leader, author, entrepreneur, cigar aficionado, motorcycle enthusiast, and host of The Root of All Success, the real Jason Duncan. The real Jason Duncan.
So how bad do you hate the IRS?
I hate them with a passion.
Let's quantify this. Like, how bad is it?
So there's like really bad people in the world, and I'm not saying that every person in the IRS is bad, but the institution as a whole is criminal. Like I absolutely fundamentally believe that taxation is theft, and I have big problems with the government in general. But yeah, the IRS is. Let's just put it this way. If I were Santa Claus, nothing but coal, my friend. Nothing but coal.
So the IRS gets a bad rap, but you believe that it's 100% deserved. There's no redeeming quality.
It is. So here's the thing. Like, the concept of taxation, I can get behind if there was true transparency, right? But there's not. Like, every single way, shape, like every possible angle that the government can use to take your money from you, they do. And we have no idea where it goes.
You and I did an event in Nashville. We're recording this into April. We did this in March. And you said, you shared those sentiments publicly with the group that we had there in Nashville. And when you said taxation is theft, I've heard other people say that. Mm-hmm. You said it. And I was like, okay, I'm on board with it. But then you explained what theft is, and the other shoe dropped for me. Yeah. This is a true story. You kind of made that so real to me that I'd never thought about it. Do you remember how you define what theft is? I mean, it's not a secret, but
yeah, I'm not sure which, because I talk about it in so many different ways. Which way did it resonate with you?
Look, if somebody takes something from you without your consent, that is theft. Yeah,
and not only that, they have guns, so it's armed theft, right? Like it's. Yeah, there's so many different issues here, but yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like every single dollar we have is taxed multiple times. Like you go out and you earn money, what do they do with that? They tax it. It's called an income tax. You go and spend the money that you were just taxed on, what do they do with that? They tax it again. It's called a sales tax. Some of the stuff that you spent money on that you were taxed twice to get, and you get something, but you don't hold on to it, and you eventually sell it. But you sell it for a gain, what do they do with that?
Capital gains.
They tax that as well, capital gains tax. There are some things that you go out and you buy with your double tax dollars and you hold on to it forever. They still tax that. It's called a property tax. And the final nail in the coffin, pun intended, is that you go out and you create something for yourself. You amass wealth, real wealth, and you die. What do they do with that?
Death tax.
They tax it. Estate, inheritance tax. So, and those are the five, what I call the five erosions of the dollar, but there's actually a sixth. It's the tax that was never voted on because it's a product of policy. Mm-hmm. That's called inflation.
Yep.
Right? And we talked about that at the event. Like inflation is the erosion of your purchasing power, but it was not voted on in Congress.
Talk to me about your perception of what inflation is, because I think most people don't understand. They just think it's this thing that happens. It's natural. It's in the background. It comes along, and whatever. Things cost more now because of inflation. Tell us what it really is.
Inflation is the increase in money supply that a policymaker has made a decision to do. Right? That by policy, they've decided to increase the amount of dollar bills that are in circulation. Now, the concept of money creation is something that I can 100% get behind if it is based on value creation, right? Mm-hmm. So if you go out into the world and you create value for someone, that creates money, right? That creates the byproduct of money. But the way the United States operates is we operate on something called a fractional reserve banking system, which essentially says that it basically says that all money is created through debt creation, right? Which is an interesting environment, right? Because the way new dollars come into circulation is debt has to be created for that to happen. Why? You go to the bank, you open up a mortgage, the bank essentially creates new money with that process. I mean, that's the money creation process. But the problem is when policymakers do that, it's not based on productivity. It's based on a decision that happens in a boardroom, right? Productivity, I can get 100% behind, right? If we go out into society and we're actually creating value and money, the byproduct, it comes into play, perfectly fine. But when you create money just because of a policy initiative, well, then all that's doing is increasing money supply without increasing goods and services. And the problem with that is if you have more money in an environment where the goods and services haven't changed, that means there's more dollars competing for the same goods and services, which costs you more at the end of the day, right? Because now those more dollars drive prices up. And no matter what the politicians are trying to say, because currently while we're recording this is an election year in the United States, and they're all aimed at trying to get you to not pay attention to the inflation that's really going on. And they'll point to numbers and statistics that make it look like inflation is actually subsiding a bit. But the only reason that's the case is because they changed the calculation, the formula for inflation. Like, it's interesting what policymakers can do when they control the metrics by which things that actually impact the lives of Americans, if they control the way you measure it, they can make it say anything they want. But here's the truth. Have you been to the grocery store lately?
Yes.
Like, that doesn't lie. It costs a lot more to buy eggs this year than it did last year and the year before that. Same thing with meat and milk and whatever else that you're buying at the grocery store, stuff that impacts real Americans. Now, don't get me wrong. We are very privileged and blessed in what we have, right? We're not feeling it the same way that most do, but the fact that most are feeling it does impact us, because that plays into the economy and what people are willing to utilize their capital for. If they're stuck between a decision of, do I feed my family tonight or do I invest in something that potentially could feed us for a lifetime? Well, not everyone can make the lifetime decision, right? They have to go to dealing with what's going on in their immediate crisis scenario that's unfolding.
Well, we're here at the Root of All Success on location in Miami, Florida, at the studio of the man sitting to my left, Edward Collins, up-level entrepreneur. You got to check him out. He's been kind enough to invite us to do this show in his studio, because I was just a guest on his show, and we sat over there in the other part of his studio. Very cool studio. If you're in Miami looking for a place to record, they're offering this up, not for free, but you can rent it, and you can come in and do some cool stuff here. So, Edward, somebody defined this inflation thing to me this way. And you said it, you just didn't use the same analogy or same illustration. Imagine you're playing Monopoly, and there's 4 people playing Monopoly. You've been playing for 3 hours. Everybody has hotels and houses, and everybody's divvied up. The money's about the same. Everybody's about equal. And somebody has the bright idea, you know what? Why don't we just distribute another $2,000 to everybody? Because I think that's what you get to the beginning, is a couple $1,000s or whatever that is. Let's just do that again. Everybody's like, that's a good idea. If we all had a little bit more money, we could play the game longer, right? So everybody gets their money.
Yep.
Well, the first time you land on someone's property that has 3 hotels on it, which property, the rent's supposed to be, I don't know, $200, because we all just got double the money. Rent's $400.
Yeah.
That's inflation.
That's quite literally the way it works.
That's what happens. You increase the money supply and the goods and services don't change, then everything becomes more expensive. And the persons responsible for that are our politicians, the people in government.
Well, in fact, it's not the politicians. It's the policymakers.
We're going
right?
to
Like, think about it. Like the Federal Reserve Bank is the biggest con game that's ever been played on the American people. Because just look at the name itself. The Federal Reserve Bank is neither federal, because it's not owned by the government. It's not a reserve. They don't keep money on hand. And it's not a bank. You and I can't go open an account there. But it actually impacts the day-to-day operations of the United States, because they control how money is actually moving, right? The money supply situation and scenario that's going on right now is astronomical. Like, a lot of people just don't get what has actually happened. In the past 4 years, more money has been printed in the past 4 years than the history of the United States. That's crazy. Like, if you look at all of the money that's ever been printed since the founding of our country, nearly 70% has been printed in 4 years. That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. And during that same time period, I'd argue actually there was less goods and services, especially during 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
But let's just assume that it was the same goods and services. It would be really, really difficult to argue that there were more, right? Just because of the productivity issues. That means more money, a ridiculously large sum of money, came into a system that was relatively closed, which is why we have this byproduct of runaway inflation at the moment.
You know, somebody said this. I was watching YouTube or Instagram Reels or something. Somebody talked about, and they were being a little bit glib about this, and it was you know, for the views. Mm-hmm. But the more I thought about it, I think this is a legitimate statement. I wonder what you think about it. If they can print money when they need it,
why tax us?
Why tax us?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that when the person said it, they were being glib, and it was kind of tongue in cheek.
It's a legitimate question.
But so, what do you believe? What is the real reason then? Why are we taxed if money can be printed to pay for whatever the heck they think that we?
It's a con game, right? If they get enough Americans to believe that the tax system is what supports the operations of government, they can keep doing what they've been doing. Right? Because if most people are unaware of the truth about how government operates, like, it can continue. But as soon as enough people realize it, like, think about it, like, and I'm not one calling for revolution. Okay, that's not the type of
it all
show this
right
is.
Here, folks.
That's not the show this is. But imagine for a moment that President Biden just recently announced his proposal for capital gains, right? Increasing the capital gains well above 40%. Right, and the theory is they want to keep it on par, if you will, with what's happening with other forms of income taxation. But think about this for a moment. We revolted against the country when they were just trying to charge us 2% tax, like, and we're okay with 40%. Like, I just don't get it. Like, the American people, like, why are so many people willing to just stay in this state of complacency? And I know the reason. It's because of ignorance, right? We're not taught the truth about money from a young age, and most will never learn the truth about money. So they'll end up continuing in this paradigm of mediocrity, hating those who have, because we've been indoctrinated to believe that those who have are our enemies.
Well, it's the story. If you take a frog and you drop it into a pot of boiling water, the frog will immediately jump out, try to figure out how to get out if he can. But if you put a frog in a pot of cold water and then slowly turn the heat up over time, he will boil to death. He will not attempt to get out. That's where we are.
Yeah.
You know, we're
Pretty
at a place
much
now where we have seen the taxes creep and creep and creep and creep. And to what end? Nobody seems to think that's a big issue. Personally, what I believe is that the worst tax is real estate tax. I can't believe that humans allowed other humans to decide we're going to tax your property in perpetuity forever, which means you never own anything.
Exactly.
You never own it. And then for those of us that are business owners, and most people don't know this, we get taxed on property inside the business. This chair that I'm sitting in, this microphone, this table, they're going to ask us every year, do you still have that chair?
Yeah.
Or we're going to tax you on that chair again. But when you bought this chair, unless you stole it, you pay tax on it.
Yeah.
So you not only paid sales tax on this thing when you bought it, you're paying the property tax to your local county forever. And if you don't, you're going to get fined or perhaps even taken to jail.
Yeah. Now that depends on the state. Obviously, each state's going to have its own rules there. So not every state taxes you in perpetuity for the property within your business. But the concept is what you really want to help your listeners and your audience understand is that taxation is a theft mechanism that is legalized, right? So here's the real thing to take from this. There's a rule book And if you can learn to read the rules and learn the rules of the game, you can actually start to play the game to win. The problem is most of us never read the rule book. So we're here playing Twister when the mega wealthy are playing chess, right? That's the situation. And until you learn the rules of the real game, you can't even hope to win. So get started reading the rules.
Yeah, and the rules, unfortunately, are like 70,000 pages long. So
Yeah.
most people don't know even where to begin,
Yeah.
which is why people like you exist. And there are many professionals who spend and dedicate their time helping educate people against this financial illiteracy.
Yes.
And I've been an entrepreneur now for a long time. And I look at my financial literacy, and if I had to put it on a scale of 100 is perfect, everything, I'm still way below 50. But I know probably 90% more than the average dude on the street, which is sad. So I know a lot, and you're well ahead of me, in leaps and bounds. But what would you say to someone who's sitting there going, yeah, but Edward, you're just a rich guy. Like, you're just a rich guy who doesn't pay his fair share. You're just a rich guy who's figured out a way to con the game so you don't have to pay. And these guys that are making, hourly wages, they're paying more than you. What do you say to those people?
So my first question is, who gets to define the word fair? Like, is it your definition or is it mine? Like, I believe I pay way more than I absolutely have to from time to time. But at the end of the day, I'm perfectly – so if you sat down with multiple millionaires, right, and asked the same question, most would be perfectly fine paying taxes if we understood where the dollars went, right? And if the dollars went towards the promise, what is the promise? Well, the dollars are going to support the operations of government. Well, let's think about this. The federal budget right now is anywhere, depending on the year, anywhere from $4 trillion to $6 trillion. The federal environment for tax collection is around $2 to $3 trillion a year. Where's the other money come from? Well, it comes through debt creation, right? The government is essentially creating these things called treasuries, and they're selling them out into the community. Some of that gets sold to foreign countries. Some of it gets sold to us and our future generations through the form of this relationship between Peter essentially taking from Paul and Paul taking from Peter back and forth ad infinitum. It's a ridiculousness that just goes on because most of us are uneducated about what's really happening behind the scenes. And if we were educated we would protest. But we would protest collectively. See, right now it's really hard for just like 100 people or even 10,000 people to get together and have anything happen. What would have to happen is everyone stop paying their taxes. Things would happen. Like, I'm not calling for that. I'm just calling for this understanding that if people really wanted to organize and make a change, they could. There's more so now than ever with the ability to access the internet and the ability to access collectiveness, if you will. You could get outcomes that were dramatically different than just a few decades ago.
You're not the guy that's advocating for you don't have to pay your federal income taxes.
Oh, definitely
You're
not.
Just
No.
to be clear, in case anybody's misinterpreting that.
No.
What do you think about those people? Because they're
The people who said,
that are, hey, you don't owe your income tax. It's against the law. It's against the Constitution.
So I'm a lawyer. I specialize in tax, estate, and business law. There's a big difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. It's about 15 years in prison. Right? So don't do that.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
As an entrepreneur, I know that you have to deal with sales on a regular basis. I mean, every entrepreneur does. And if you aren't paying attention to sales as an entrepreneur, you're not going to be an entrepreneur for very long. But I've got a sponsor of this show called Dub that helps you bring the personal back to sales. If you want to figure out how to improve content creation, improve client trust, improve your sales process, decrease the sales cycle, because we all know time kills deals. If you want to increase client bookings and increase conversions, you need to take a look at Dub. There's a special offer for Dub for listeners to The Root of All Success at therealjasonduncan.com/Dub, and that's DUBB. What Dub does, I've been using this for years. I'm a huge fan, and I'm so honored that they're our primary sponsor of the podcast.
but they have helped over 60,000 businesses around the world communicate better, to make sales easier, to make sales more personal. And Dub is built for growing teams. I mean, you can set up video emails, you can set up custom onboarding, you can do admin reporting, anything you need around video and sales and automation. Dub is there. You can try Dub now. Your conversions to sales are waiting. All you got to do is go to therealjasonduncan.com/Dub. And there you're going to get 2 weeks for free to try Dub. Plus, you're going to get 50% off your first 2 months of Dub. You can't beat that. So go check it out. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/Dub.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
So when did you first become aware of this as an issue? And I want to get into your story in a minute, but when did you go, I don't like this, and I want to help other people also understand it?
So I had I came from a very poor family. Like I'm fifth of 6 kids, 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters, 1 younger sister. And my family, growing up, we had to work really hard just to get up to the poverty line, right? We didn't come from money at all. So pretty much everything I learned about money was wrong as a child, not only from school, but also in my family dynamic. But there was this business that was situated pretty close to where I was living. I think it was called Elkis. It was something like that. Elkis and Sons, I think was the name of the company. And I always, like, as a kid, I would watch like a really nice car, like a Mercedes-Benz, pull into the parking lot where this company was. And I was like, I want to be that someday. I want to be wealthy. And I got it in my head that wealthy meant like being a millionaire, right? If you can earn $1 million, like that means you are wealthy. So for the longest time, I made that my goal. Like I wanted to create an environment where I hit 7 figures. And I tried like pretty much everything under the sun. I worked, like the first 4 years in business was a complete and utter failure. The only reason I didn't fail out is because I'm really stubborn. But I got to a point where I was starting to actually get some traction. And one day, it happened. I hit 7 figures. And I was like over the moon until April 13th the following year. I was sitting down in front of my accountant at the time, and have you ever walked into a room and it just smells like paper? Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah.
Well, that was my experience. I'm sitting there. He had a big mahogany desk, and on top of it was piles and piles of paper. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm not really sure what to expect. And he's like, Edward, you had an amazing year last year. I'm like, thank you. I was like all proud of myself. I was like, yeah, I finally did it. I'm a millionaire. And he goes, yeah, we have to make sure that we get everything done. And he was going through all the numbers. I'm like, okay, I'm listening. And then he was like, yeah, and we have to write a check today because I have to pay my fair share. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like I was sending checks in like
you're doing your quarterly
during the year. I was paying throughout the year. And I'm like, he's like, no, we have to write a check. And I'm like, oh, okay. How much is the check? And he told me $352,000. And I'm like, what? I was utterly unprepared for that moment. I looked at him and I said, did you just say that out loud? Like literally, it blurted out of my mouth. Did you just say that out loud? And he looked at me and he's like, yeah, you owe taxes. And I'm like, so I'm not a millionaire. And I was like, this is never going to happen again. Like, I need to understand how I can work really hard throughout the entire year, generating capital to share it with a partner I didn't even know I had. Like, I just didn't get it. And I made it my mission to figure it out, like to learn why I was able to make the mistake in the first place of not understanding all of this. And then 2, to figure out why other people who I was paying to teach me weren't teaching me, weren't helping me. Like I really wanted to figure out that disconnect. And I started my journey. I dove headfirst into like reading the tax code, learned that I actually like the concepts of it, like understanding like the the rules, right? Because then once you learn it, you can say, okay, well, if I take this rule and I apply it over here, it actually benefits myself and my family, and it benefits my employees, and it benefits my customers. Because every dollar I get to keep, I'm not sending it to Washington, D.C. I actually get to put it to work in my local community.
So I had a similar experience now that you're telling me that story, but the outcome was different. So the first full year in business for me as an entrepreneur, I had a $60,000 bill due, and I had paid quarterlies as well. So obviously a very big difference in number, $300,000 almost difference. But I remember that feeling going, holy crap.
Yeah.
And for you took that same motivation and you said, I'm going to figure out how to make sure this never happens again, and I'm going to understand the tax code. For me, I said, I'm going to make sure it never happens again, and I'm going to hire somebody to tell me how not to do this. So I didn't go try to learn it myself.
That probably would have been the smarter route. I would have gotten there much quicker. The challenge was I couldn't find anyone.
So how long ago was this?
This was late 2000s.
So late 2000s. So this happens. What were you doing to make that much money?
Yeah. So my first business that I started as an adult was a private wealth management firm. It started off as a financial planning firm, and we've evolved over the decades into a true full-fledged private wealth management firm.
And was that independent? Were you working under some other brokerage?
So my very first financial planning practice, I was under another brokerage environment, but over the years we've evolved into our own firm.
Gotcha. So you were doing private wealth management, helping people understand finances, where to put their money to get the biggest gains.
Correct.
And what you didn't realize
is how to keep it.
How to keep it.
Yeah.
So you could accumulate it, but you didn't know how to retain it.
Yeah, I got really, well, again, it took me a while, but I got really good at making money, right? And then that rude awakening of not being able to hold on to it, it just stuck with me. It changed. It like flipped a switch in my brain as to what I was most interested in. And then what I learned is like the secret of making more is keeping what you already make. Mm-hmm. Like, because it's the net that matters. Gross, that's a vanity metric. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to make $1 billion, go out and spend 10 billion in ads and you'll probably make $1 billion, right? Not a good dynamic to be in. So it's net, not gross, that matters most.
So you had your series licenses as an investment professional.
Correct.
But you weren't an attorney?
Not yet.
So that was the catapult moment for you to say, I'm going to go become an attorney?
So we have to backtrack a little bit. When I was a kid, I had this desire at some point to go into law. This is as a late preteen, early teenager. And I got involved in my high school in like mock trial, and I loved it. It was like an awesome experience for me. At the same time, I had actually developed this desire to try to serve my country in some way. And I had thought that the best path for me to do that was to go into the FBI. I fell in love with the concept of becoming an FBI agent. So when I graduated from university, that's what my mission was to become an FBI agent. So I started my first career as an adult working for the government. So I was on the dark side. And I started working for the Department of Justice. But I learned pretty quickly once I got the chance to see behind the curtain that I really don't like the government. And I decided to part ways, right, from a logistics standpoint. And I went into the private sector because for at least me, don't get me wrong, I believe that there are probably some amazing human beings that work in government. I just think that the system is fractured and broken and corrupt. So even with good humans, it's really hard to do good things when the apparatus is so challenged. So for me, I realized that the best way to serve my country is actually to be an entrepreneur, because I believe that entrepreneurs have an ability to change the world way better than anyone in D.C. ever could.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah, so that's what I started doing. I started doing these. When I left government, I didn't have a plan B. Because I hit my last straw moment, and I handed in my resignation. And because I had escalated up the channel of security clearances pretty quickly, I was at a level that essentially as soon as I handed in my resignation, I was escorted out of the building. I couldn't even go back into my office. They had to pack up all my stuff and ship it to me. Weeks later, I remember. It was like a dramatically long period of time. But since I didn't have a plan B, I had to fall back on something that I had already had an interest in, which was money. Like I'd always had an interest in money. So I started doing these workshops. I was born and raised in New Jersey, so I was doing these workshops at local libraries in New Jersey, teaching people how to budget. And it was like the most raggedy workshop environment ever. Like I remember I was charging $5 to attend. I was spending like $4.50 for like food and coffee and everything. I was not making any money there. But someone came to one of my workshops and came up to me at the end of the workshop and asked if he could buy me lunch the next day. And I was like, absolutely, yes, because I had no money.
I'm making money.
Yeah,
free lunch.
Like free lunch. I was happy. And during that lunch, he asked me if I ever given any thought to getting into financial services. And I said, no, I'd never given it a thought. So I started down a path of doing my investigation, due diligence into the concept of financial services. I'm like, this actually could be something I could get behind. This is something that would be interesting. And I launched my very first financial planning practice in 1998. And then I built and scaled that over the years and then added some other businesses to the mix. But it got to a point where I had systematized everything because I had learned from mentors who taught me how to do things. I had systematized it to a point where in 2012, 2013, I was ready to retire. Like all my companies were operating. I didn't have to be in them day to day anymore, and I could step back. And that's what I did. I retired. And my wife and I, we started going around doing like the stuff that retired people do, but at a very young age. Like we traveled the world. We saw like amazing sights, but there are only so many beaches that you can go to without it being monotonous. And it got to a point where I sat back and I'm like, well, I'm not fulfilled anymore. Like the traveling is amazing, but it's just not doing it for me. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't talk about, like on social media a lot. Is like retirement is an awesome thing, but there's also some drawbacks if you don't do it the right way. And I wasn't doing it the right way at that time. So I started looking at, like, introspectively, like, what were some of my bucket list things that I had not yet done? And on my bucket list thing was law school. Like, I had always wanted to do it, and I never did it. So I'm like, I'm going to go to law school, but I'm going to do it for fun, which is a totally different dynamic, right? Because I'm not doing it for a job. I own multiple companies that are, like, doing really, really well. So it was a very interesting thing to be in law school with other students who are doing it because they want a career. When I was doing it, I was just there to enjoy the experience of it, which was a totally different dynamic. So I was able to get my law degree from a top 50 school, right, in the U.S. I went to Seton Hall Law, graduated 8th in my class, and I just did it for fun. It was a totally different dynamic. So that was my experience with it.
So when you so in late 2000s, you had this experience of hitting the $1 million earning mark, and then having to pay your silent partner.
And then it just went.
But then so
once I learned the rules of the game,
and then but then
it just went catastrophic.
But it sounds like it was probably another decade. No,
it was only a couple of years.
How many? But no, until you get to your law degree.
Yeah, 2014 I started law school.
Oh, okay.
Graduated in 2017. Yeah, I was already retired at that point. So in about 2 to 3 years, we took it to the moon. Like just understanding how to scale a company, understanding the metrics that go into it, systems, processes, procedures, so that I don't have to be in the mix. I mean, we hit amazing figures, relatively speaking, without a significant input of human capital. We leveraged technology to a degree that we had, until that time, really had been struggling trying to figure out. But once we hit our cadence, it was off to the races.
And what businesses were these?
Private wealth management firm, accounting firm, fractional CFO company, tax firm.
Okay.
And then we had a couple of other little businesses here and there. Like we own salons, we own vending companies.
Yeah. So
plus our real estate too. So our
well,
residential and our commercial real estate.
All your money companies are still what you do today. You still have those today.
Yeah, I mean, we still own all of our companies. I've never exited. We just collect.
Well, what would you say if you had to look back in your lifetime of experience as an entrepreneur that's led you to this place where you're, by all accounts from the outside looking in, very successful? What was the one thing that you said, this is the one key that unlocks success for me? What would you say that is?
Mentorship.
Mentorship.
Beyond a doubt. Like there is no substitute for learning from someone else who's already done it. Like, don't get me wrong, it's good to learn as well and fail and then iterate, but the shortcut in the journey is vicarious learning. Like, if you can learn from someone who's already been there, it dramatically changes things for you. You can fast track, you can iterate on their success metrics, right? You can enhance what they've done and accomplish even more, but to get there more quickly, absolutely learn from someone who's gotten there already.
How do you define that word success? What does that mean to you?
For me, it's evolved over time. Like, for the longest time, it was dollars, right? Like, that doesn't do it for me anymore. That's not the thing. Freedom is the most important thing, and that I classify it as financial freedom, right? Because if you're going to fight for any freedom in the world, financial freedom is the freedom you want to fight for, because it literally leads to all other freedoms. It leads to the freedom of mobility, the freedom of healthcare, the freedom of education, the freedom of security, the freedom of choice. Right? If you're financially free, they can't do anything. Right? The figurative they, right? No matter who it is in your life that potentially is an opponent or obstacle, financial freedom gives you the ability to navigate around it. So having financial freedom, to me, is the definition of success.
And by that definition, do you consider yourself to be successful?
I believe that I'm constantly working toward it. So here's the thing. I don't think success is a destination. It is the journey. Like, I am constantly on the journey of financial freedom. The beautiful thing about that, the fact that it is not a destination, is even though I hit milestones of success and I can celebrate in those moments, I don't stagnate in them. And I see a lot of people who do have specific destination definitions lead a less than fulfilled life. Because once you hit it, it's like, now what? But if your definition of success is the journey, you can always be on the journey. That's the way I try to live my life.
So if you could talk to an entrepreneur who's listening to the show and said, look, if you want to become successful, this is one thing that you got to do. This is your time to give some advice. And you've already talked about mentorship, so that's off the table. But if you could say this, Mr. or Mrs. Entrepreneur, if you will do this, you can become successful, what would you say it is?
Become financially literate. Like, you need to know the language, right? So you can't read the rules of the game if you don't even know the language. Financial literacy is the foundational precepts of everything. Like, if you can understand the definitions of assets and liabilities, what the true definitions are, get beyond like the junk that they try to teach you in grammar school. Like, the real definition, asset is something you control which generates cash flow for you. You don't have to own it. You just have to control it so that you are the collector of the cash flow. Cash flow is the secret ingredient to financial freedom. Like, if you were to boil it down, I have a formula for financial freedom. It's just 10 words. Free cash flow greater than your daily needs and wants. If you have that, you're financially free. Because once your earn rate is greater than your burn rate, that excess is financial freedom. The problem is most people will achieve that in what I call a state of richness. Don't get me wrong, it's way better to be rich than it is to be poor. I've been both. But the challenge with being rich is that it requires you to do the thing that generates the excess. You're the requirement. You're the cog. The problem with that is that means it's never permanent. And because if you decide to go away, like my family and I, we don't give ourselves like tangible gifts anymore. We try to give ourselves gifts of experiences. So we go away a lot. We travel a lot still. We have 2 little kids. So my wife and I agree that the best classroom is the one outside of the 4 walls, like out in the real world. So we went away over the holidays this past year to South Africa. So we were gone for, I don't even know. I don't even know how many weeks it was. Like, that's like, because we don't pay attention to that sort of stuff. But all the companies were continuing to do the things that they were supposed to be doing in order to generate the cash flow. That's permanence, right? It doesn't mean it's permanent, right? You don't want to be rich. You want to be wealthy. Wealthy is the same state. Free cash flow greater than your daily needs and wants. It's just no longer you generating the cash flow. It's the assets you've accumulated over your lifetime. There are a variety of them. Real estate's one. Businesses are another. Like, it's an asset that you control that generates cash flow, giving you that cash flow environment so that you can live a life of financial freedom.
my mentor told me one time, he said, look, if you sat down to play a game with someone, a board game of any kind, it doesn't matter what it is, and they knew the rules and they played it before, but you didn't, who's going to win that game?
Exactly.
And, yeah, the person who knows the rules. And so when he started saying that, and you just iterated the same point, is that becoming financially literate is that way to become the winner of the game, is because you now know the rules. So
it does something else too, because there's this interesting thing about language. When you speak the same language as a person, you can actually have a conversation. So if you're not financially literate, it's very difficult for you to have a conversation that can elevate you, right? Because those who are financially literate are talking and you have no idea what they're saying. But if you become financially literate and you get into the right rooms with the right people, you can start having some amazing conversations.
So what then is the most accessible route to becoming financially literate?
Books, podcasts, mentorship programs, the like. I mean, here's the thing. I know for a fact it will not happen at school. It just won't. Mm-hmm. The school system is not designed to make you independent. It's actually designed to do the exact opposite, make you dependent. Like think about just the concept of how a test happens in school, right? The test is theoretically the metric by which they measure your intelligence. But you're sitting down taking a test, and if you don't know the answer, it's not like you can look on Billy's paper or Sally's paper, right? In fact, you get in trouble for doing that. But if you and I, Jason, if we're trying to do business together, and I don't know the answer, I can actually go to you and we can collaborate and figure it out together. That is really the success metric, right? Mm-hmm. The collaboration capability, so long as we speak the same language. Because if I was not doing anything in my life, like if I had no financial literacy and I was like completely ridiculous with regard to money, and I came to you and asked to collaborate, you'd probably look at me like, don't get me wrong, you'd probably be charitable. You may want to help, but that's a different thing. Helping is not collaborating. And collaboration is where you get the keys to leverage. And leverage, well, that's what business is all about.
All right, so as we close our conversation today, you've obviously demonstrated in your life that you are financially literate. You've figured these things out. But you're not only keeping that for yourself and clients that are coming to you for wealth management and tax services, but you're also creating community to help the average person, the average entrepreneur come to you and say, hey, I want to join a community that helps me become literate. Tell everybody a little bit about that.
I basically looked at what would I have wanted, looking back on my younger self, because I fundamentally believe we're all best positioned to teach the younger version of us, because one, we were in that position, and two, we know what it took to get out of that position. So I look back at my younger self and I'm like, well, what would I have loved to have access to? Well, I would have loved to be in a room with all people interested in the same thing. The problem is most of us don't have that. Usually, well, let's put it this way. You do have it, but the things you're interested in are not to take you to the next level. It's like, what can we do this Saturday to completely drink away our life and not remember what it is that actually brings us true joy, right? There's lots of things that we tend to be in the same rooms with people, but the people that we're in the rooms don't have aspirations that are of a nature to really elevate yourself. So looking back on my younger self, I'm like, I would have loved to have had a community where it was filled with entrepreneurs that are all interested in taking their life and their business to the next level, right? Because those two things have to move in tandem. Now, sometimes one is going to be above another, but they have to move in the same direction. So that's what we try to build. We're building this environment where we're just filling it up with entrepreneurs who all want to get to that next level and who are interested in the concept of collaboration, right? To working with one another, to support one another. Because even though I do have a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience, I'm still only one human being. But if you're part of a community with all different entrepreneurs, all different walks of life, all different businesses and industries, and different stages of their entrepreneurial journey, all interested in helping one another to get to that next level, well, that's a team. Way different type of sport.
So what does that community look like? How would somebody get involved in it?
It's called the Uplevel Community. Like, all you'd have to do is go to theuplevelcommunity.com. We basically lay it out for everyone as to what it is and how to be participatory, how to get the opportunity to take advantage of it, how to jump in, kick the tires, see if you like it.
Well, I know from firsthand experience following you on Instagram. We didn't even get a chance to talk about that, but you went from 6,000 followers across all platforms to 2.9 million.
Yeah, we're just about 3 million now.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, and you didn't buy those followers, you didn't pay for them.
It's all organic.
It's all organic, and the reason is, from my seat looking in, is like you talk about things that people like me want to know, and you're consistent about it. So you have great content, React videos, etc. So tell everybody how to follow you on Instagram.
Easiest way, at @EdwardCollins_upleveled.
At @EdwardCollins_upleveled. And go check out the Upleveled. What is it?
The Uplevel Community.
.com. Is it Upleveled ED?
Nope. Uplevel.
The Uplevelcommunity.com. The Uplevelcommunity.com. We'll put that in the show notes.
Awesome.
Edward, thank you so much for allowing me to use your studio. This is great.
100%.
But the conversation really gave me a little bit more, I guess, perspective on your success. Congratulations, man. I mean,
Thank you.
What you've done, I didn't know where the lawyer thing came in. Now that makes so much sense to me. It's like, okay, that's cool, and I could go do that too. That's pretty cool. So thank you again for doing this.
100%.
Appreciate you very much, and everybody else out there for listening. I'm the real Jason Duncan, and I want you to listen to what the guy says on the outro. But as always, Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.